Good morning. Thank you all for coming. And I also want to thank International Crisis Group for co-sponsoring this event and Hugh Pop. We're very happy to have you here. Hugh Pop is Turkey-Cyprus Project Director for International Crisis Group, and prior to his...
Turn on your microphone.
Doesn't work?
Is it on?
It's on.
Okay.
You can't hear me? I didn't say anything important yet. Hugh Pop is the Turkey-Cyprus Project Director for the International Crisis Group, and prior to his appointment as director in 2007, he was a foreign correspondent for 25 years, primarily covering Turkey, the Middle East, and Central Asia for the Wall Street Journal. Hugh will talk about a forthcoming ICG report on Turkey and the Middle East. Then we'll open the floor for questions, followed by a book lounge. So today's event is a bit unusual due to time constraints. We had to schedule two events one after another. So please don't leave after the speech, because Hugh will continue to speak about his latest book called Dining with Al-Qaeda, 3 Decades Exploring the Many Worlds of the Middle East. I just started reading the book, and it's a great book. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Gönül, and thank you to the Middle East Institute for having me here to talk about our upcoming report. I'll just go through the main lines of what we're trying to say, and I think it'll be out in a week or two. And I think the main issue that we've been trying to address, and we've been doing it for the past several months, is the whole question that you see in newspaper headlines. Is Turkey turning its back on the West? Is Turkey joining an Islamist bloc? Is Turkey rejoining the Middle East? And the answer is, of course, no. That is incorrect. But it's amazing how difficult it is to persuade people of the fact, especially in Europe. And so I'd like to outline the arguments of why this is not, in fact, the case, and why, despite appearances and despite newspaper reporting, which is always attracted to those flashy headlines, the basics of Turkey's engagement remains with the EU and the US, even though there have been changes and adjustments in style and also substance. I think with such an audience, I don't need to go too much into the history of Turkey in the Middle East, but I'll just go through it briefly since 1923, when the Turkish Republic was founded on the ashes of the Ottoman Empire with the deliberate idea that it was no longer going to be an Islamic power. It was going to be a secular nation state. Very important change, and one that was, in a way, defining itself away from its past. Therefore, definitely not part of the Middle East, definitely turned towards Europe, which at that time represented modern civilization. And the same thing happened in the Arab world, by the way. As things went on, they defined themselves also as Arab nation states and turned their back on the idea of an Islamic common home. And in Turkey, there was an additional problem with the Arab world, is that there was a perception that the Arabs had knifed them in the back during the First World War by joining the British. So no love lost, and for the first several decades of the Turkish Republic, no real interest in relationships in the Middle East. That began to change in 1964 when the United States' famous Johnson letter in 1964 warned Turkey that it would not support it if it got into a fight with the Greek Cypriots. And if the Soviet Union intervened against Turkey, then Turkey would be on its own. At that point, Turkey started a new era of contact with the Middle East to try and get some support from its erstwhile friends. And that is how things continued most of the time. More opportunistic, I would say, than strategic. When the Middle East was rich, Turkey would go looking for business there. When Turkey was in a tight corner politically, it would go looking for friends. The Israel relationship has similarly been one of constant fluctuation. Turkey one of the first countries to recognize the Jewish state in 1949, I think, 48, 49, I can't remember, and diplomatic relations in 52, but no ambassador until 1992. And I think that tells you a lot about how Turkey's always been cautious towards Israel. I think that you often see in the press an idea of there's a myth about there always having been a solid strategic relationship with Israel. That was only true in the sense that at points in the 50s and 60s, there was a feeling that we are both Western allies of the NATO bloc against the Soviet machinations in the Middle East. That I think, was the main aspect of the strategic side. And you can plot the chart. When Israel was perceived as being aggressive towards Palestinians and unjust towards Palestinians, relations go down. When Israel is perceived as reaching out to Palestinians and trying to make peace, the relationship goes up. So you have a crisis after the Six-Day War in 1967-68. You have a big crisis in 1980 when Israel declares Jerusalem as its eternal capital. And you have big problems during the Intifadas and especially during the last Gaza war. This has always happened. There's nothing new, nothing to do with AKP's so-called supposedly Islamist leanings. The other key relationships, obviously, for Turkey in the Middle East are its neighbors, Iran, Iraq, Syria. Iran is a somewhat special case. The modern state of Iran was actually founded by a Turkic dynasty, the Safavids, who invented Shiism as a state ideology, in contradistinction to the Ottomans, who had a Sunni Muslim state ideology, and they tried to influence each other. The Safavid state would push Shia missionaries into the Ottoman lands, and the Ottomans would use their methods in the Iranian lands. And that continues today. A quarter of Iran is Azeri Turkish speaking. Supreme Leader Ali Khamenei, Hussein Mousavi are good Azeris, speak Turkish. Lots of people in Iran watching Turkish sitcoms and television in Turkish. That's quite subversive sometimes in terms of state ideology in Iran. Similarly, Iran has, as in the medieval times when it would send missionaries into Turkey, in recent decades there have at points been subversive threats to Turkey through Islamist maneuverings by Iran in Turkey. But on the whole, the relationship has been quite stable, a kind of rivalry. The border between the two countries was drawn in 1639, has not changed since. And so I think that the main point of the Iranian relationship for Turkey is a bit like two wrestlers holding each other and keeping a good eye that the other one doesn't make a sudden move. And Turkey, very interested in opening up Iranian markets. Iran, very interested in making sure Turkey doesn't get any strategic advantage from it. 2004, the parliament cancels two very important contracts, the cell phone contract, the operation of the Imam Khomeini airport contract, on the grounds that Turkey was somehow, or these companies were somehow Israeli stooges. Syria and Iraq, more interesting to Turkey in a way because they were real parts of the Ottoman Empire. Very close, interesting legal systems are quite closely based on Turkey's legal system. The whole history, social history, cultural history is much more closely intertwined with Turkey. Of course, they're Arabic speaking, as are parts of southern Turkey, of course, but close culturally, but a big problem for Turkey in the Cold War decades. Syria harbored